The Galactic War Council hovered above the map table, their glowing eyes focused on a small cluster of blinking red lights, representing a newly formed army on the planet Doraxis. The council chamber buzzed with amusement as the generals of different alien species exchanged mocking glances and sarcastic remarks. One of them, a bloated and pompous Tharna commander, laughed aloud, calling it the tiniest army ever fielded in a war zone. They probably sent children to do a soldier's job, he jeered, slapping his tentacle on the table. The others joined in laughing, forgetting that the blinking red icons meant this force had already taken 3 key outposts in under a day. They sent a reconnaissance unit to observe this so-called tiny army, thinking they would return within hours with footage confirming their weakness, but the unit never returned. Instead, the only thing that came back was a distorted audio recording filled with strange noises, whispers, and a sudden scream cut off mid-word. The council paused but quickly dismissed it as a technical glitch, or perhaps wild animals attacking the unit. After all, how dangerous could such a small force be on the surface of Doraxis? The forest stood silent under twin suns. Tall jagged trees creaked in the wind, and deep within their shadows figures moved. They were bipedal and wrapped in dark camouflage. They trained in silence, communicating with hand signals and short bursts of speech, each movement precise, each motion disciplined. They carried weapons that did not hum with energy or glow with plasma. Instead, they looked ancient, mechanical, like relics of the past, but they moved with purpose and precision. On curious alien soldier, a scout named Varlet, disobeyed orders and tried to get closer to this strange group. He used stealth tech and cloaking devices, slithering through the underbrush until he reached the edge of their training zone. He watched them closely, recording their strange drills. One of them turned suddenly and looked directly at him. Despite his cloaking field active, he froze, feeling something he had never felt before, something raw and cold and ancient. The figure tilted its head slowly, then disappeared from view. Varlic activated emergency retreat protocols, but it was too late. The council received his final transmission, just a burst of static, followed by a single whispered word. Human General 4 of the Syrixian Horde slammed his fist on the table. Humans, they were myths, warnings, and old battle logs used to scare new recruits. The council demanded more information, but few had direct data on them. Most records were sealed or corrupted. Some spoke of wars centuries ago, where a human colony wiped out a superior alien force using nothing but old guns and home-made explosives. Others mentioned psychological warfare tactics unheard of outside the human mind. Still, they laughed a little nervously this time. Perhaps it was a name coincidence, perhaps not real at all. Meanwhile, in the jungle, the tiny army continued to move through enemy territory. Unseen, their leader, a man known only as Captain Silas, stood atop a ridge, his face smeared with dirt, his eyes scanning the valley below. Remember, he said without raising his voice, they think we are small, they think we are weak. Looked back at his soldiers lined up behind him. Every one of them scarred, hardened silently, have no idea what small really means. Later that day, an alien strike team equipped with high-end armor and drones entered the jungle. Their scanners picked up faint trails and heat signatures. They laughed, thinking they would mop up the last of the resistance before supper. They followed the trail deeper and deeper until their tech began to glitch. Drones dropped from the sky, comms crackled, then went dead. One soldier raised his plasma rifle and shouted, "Movement!" Nothing answered. They fanned out, searching one by one. Each member was taken down without a sound. When only one remained, he activated his distress beacon and fired blindly into the trees. A hand reached from the shadows, grabbed his weapon, and yanked it free. The last thing he saw was a pair of human eyes, calm, steady, and unblinking. Transmission from his suit played back to the council room, showing his final moments, then cutting off into static. The laughter died instantly on the battlefield. The humans moved with surgical precision. They set traps, used terrain and confusion to their advantage. They worked like a pack of wolves, relentless, unforgiving. An efficient council recalled all recon teams and called for reinforcements. But deep in the shadows of Doraxis, a message was spreading among the alien troops. They are not a tiny army, they are something else, and they are coming through. Reinforcements arrived in waves. Massive dropships descended onto the surface of Doraxis, shaking the ground. With their thunderous engines, armored units rolled out, glistening with energy shields and enhanced optics. Alien soldiers lined up in formation, their weapons humming with power and their commanders barking orders across frequencies no one had used in centuries. They came expecting resistance, but not fear. They came expecting to crush a scattered group, not face legend. Jungle was silent again, too silent even for a war zone. Scout drones zipped through the trees, capturing heat signatures of what appeared to be nothing more than animal trails. Yet squad after squad sent to those coordinates vanished every time they entered a region marked By previous disappearances, no signals came back. No soldiers returned. One technician reported a strange anomaly repeating across the battlefield. Every transmission ended the same way, with the same whispered word. Human Commander Zalvek of the Grishik Syndicate was one of the highest-ranking alien officers deployed for the operation. He was proud, ruthless, and had led dozens of successful campaigns. He had never believed in human stories. They were war myths, ghost tales for cowards. But now, as he stood before the wreckage of one of their heavy scout walkers split open from within, he began to feel something strange. A sliver of doubt ordered one full battalion to sweep the jungle in a wall formation with overlapping visual and sensor data. No room for error, no room for surprise. The march began with thunder. Alien boots stomping through underbrush, energy scanners sweeping the trees from left to right. Nothing could hide from them, or so they thought. They found the first set of traps. 20 minutes and crude-looking wires laced between branches seemed laughable, until one of them was triggered. A small detonation launched shrapnel in every direction, bypassing shields and tearing into an armored joint. Screams echoed and confusion spread before orders could be restored. Another explosion hit the rear, then another at the center. When they finally regrouped, they found no enemy bodies, no visible attackers, only signs of movement, footprints that circled them more than once, as if they were being studied from a ridge above, hidden beneath natural camouflage. 2 human soldiers watched silently. One spoke softly into a radio. "They bite like rookies over copy." That replied another voice, "We bleed them slow. Be the end of the sweep." The battalion had lost nearly a third of its Forchesk. Silvik cursed and slammed his fists against the side of his transport. They still had not seen a single confirmed human target. Up close, only footage blurs shadows and that recurring whisper that haunted every comm log. Called a war council with other alien generals demanding answers. Some recommended orbital bombardment, but the terrain made it impossible without destroying valuable resources. Others proposed bringing in psychic units trained to detect irregular thoughts. Even those were hesitant. General Dorvik of the Eldari stood and revealed something that chilled the entire room. Centuries ago, his people fought a brief war with an isolated human colony. They lost contact with half their fleet in one night. The surviving commander retired and never spoke again. He left behind only one written phrase in his logs: "The fight." Like they do not know what fear is in the ground. Things grew worse for the aliens. Every encounter ended the same: flashes of gunfire, quick ambushes, radio silence, broken gear. The humans used old weapons, projectile-based, but deadly in the right hands. They fought in squads, moved like phantoms, never staying long, never giving their enemy a second chance. One squad managed to corner a human soldier injured and pinned against a rocky outcrop. They demanded his surrender. He stood, bleeding weapon at his side, and stared at them with no expression, no desperation, only focus. Raised his hand slowly, and the aliens tightened their aim, but instead of attacking, he pulled something from his belt, a small black device, and pressed it. An explosion erupted behind them, not a bomb, but a sonic flash, disorienting and violent. By the time they recovered, the human was gone. An alien soldier dropped his weapon and backed away, muttering over and over that they were cursed, that they had eyes like burning ice. Alien command structure began to crack. Whispers of retreat filtered through the ranks. Some soldiers refused to patrol without drones. Others started disobeying orders. The jungle was killing their minds as much as their bodies. Salvik ordered a full lockdown. All units were to remain within defensive perimeters until a full scan of the area was complete. But even then the attacks continued, not during patrols, not in open combat, but at night when guards slept, when sensors glitched, when no one expected. Etone night, a perimeter camera recorded a single frame of a human crawling upside down along a tree trunk, moving faster than expected, eyes glowing faintly in infrared. "They are watching us," someone said in the briefing room. "Not hunting, not fighting, watching, and they are learning." Solvik stared at the footage silently, then stood and spoke for the first time without arrogance. "Bring me everything you have on their kin." The data on humans was locked, buried behind old treaties and forbidden archives, but under the emergency code of total warfare, the Galactic Council had granted Zalvik access to the sealed vaults. The files were ancient, faded, and fragmented, yet even the surviving records made his scales tighten and his jaw clench. The first document was a battlefield report from a war that happened over 200 cycles ago. A single human squad had held a frozen ridge for 11 days against an armored force of 3,000. They had no air support, limited ammunition, and no reinforcements. The log ended with a note written in blood by the last surviving soldier. He wrote, "We do not fall, we rise again and again." Zalvik reviewed more files, each one worse than the last. Tales of human endurance, of impossible resistance, of pain tolerance beyond reason. One video showed a human soldier pulling shrapnel from his leg tying a rag around the wound and returning to battle. With a broken arm, there were reports of humans resisting psychic interrogation, to the point of brain hemorrhage just to protect squad mates. One file claimed they destroyed an entire alien hive fleet using nothing but chemical reactions improvised. A boredom mining vessel looked up from the table and realized the truth. The tiny army on Doraxis was not a joke, it was a nightmare. They had awakened a storm they could not control on the surface. The jungle changed. It no longer felt like territory. It felt like a trap, branches twisted into shapes that suggested movement even when there was none. The wind carried voices, whispers impossible to trace. One squad found a broken helmet hanging from a tree branch, smeared with mud and marked with a strange human word carved with a blade. The word read patience. Some aliens started seeing shapes in the dark, forms moving through fog. When they turned around, nothing was there. Others reported hearing footsteps beside them, but no signs of life. At Al-Morali collapsed. Discipline cracked. Soldiers fought among themselves. Commanders panicked and executed subordinates for imagined treason. Meanwhile, Captain Silas stood with his team in an underground chamber, a forgotten ruin buried beneath the planet. He examined an old galactic beacon, disabled and rusting. This was their signal post, a place from which they monitored every alien movement. His second-in-command, a woman named Claire, adjusted her headset and nodded. The enemy is falling. A partser, she Seda responded. Not yet, but they will. In orbit, the flagship of the alien fleet began receiving strange broadcasts, encrypted messages using dead languages with impossible timestamps. They traced the signal to know where it came from. Coordinates that no longer existed. On any Mapone message stood out a repeating phrase that translated as "We walk unseen, we strike in silence. We are the storm." Solvik received these reports and paced inside his command tent. He ordered immediate psychological screenings for all soldiers and approved withdrawal plans from the southern front. But before he could implement them, another disaster struck. A convoy of alien supplies meant for a forward base was ambushed in broad daylight. No energy weapons, no visible troops, only traps, distractions, and then overwhelming fire. The humans did not just attack, they humiliated the convoy, recording their panicked retreat and hacking into their secure channel to play the footage back. Every alien soldier watched themselves flee in terror, while a human voice narrated their failure, slowly mocking lithe fear turned into paranoia. Soldiers refused to patrol. Commanders locked themselves in armored rooms. Messages from the front lines came less and less until finally Silence Exovic called an emergency gathering of the highest-ranking generals across species. When they arrived, their faces told the whole story. Not one of them still believed this war could be won with strength. Alana, General Dorvik spoke softly, but with force. We must understand them not as soldiers, but as predators. A younger commander interrupted, calling the humans cowards hiding in shadows, attacking without honor. Dorvik stood, slammed a file on the table and pointed to a dread. What happened to the Eldari fleet on Zyron Prime? They sent for ships to burn a human city. The humans sent back pieces of those ships, one piece for each of their fallen civilians. They are not cowards, they are consequences. Alec leaned forward and said one word: surrender. Silence fell across the table. Some looked shocked, others nodded slowly. Then the lights flickered, every screen turned black one by one, before being replaced by a single image: a human soldier standing in the jungle, face painted, armor scratched, rifle in hand. Behind him, a burning alien banner. Then a message appeared beneath it in the common galactic tongue. Wu laughed at the tiny army. Now listen to it coming. Solvik stared at the screen, not with anger, but with something deeper: understanding. Alien generals ordered their forces to regroup, to dig in, to build walls of plasma and steel across the southern front. They thought maybe if they contained the humans, boxed them in, they could control the madness. They could reset the war. But no matter how strong their walls, no matter how high their towers, no matter how advanced their drones, the humans always found a way through. Underground with the night after night, alien sentries vanished without sound. Security cameras caught nothing, only static. Thermal scanners recorded temperatures dropping to near freezing, then spiking with sudden heat, then falling silent. One soldier was found shaking in a corner, eyes wide, mumbling about a shadow that spoke his name. Deep inside the jungle, Captain Silas watched from a cliff edge, wind pulling at his coat. His eyes scanned the valley below, where the aliens had set up their main supply base. Energy shields pulsed around armored containers. Troops moved in patterns predictable, rehearsed, but to Silas they looked like a puzzle. Already halfway solved. Claire stepped beside him, pointing to a map. She whispered, "They think they can trap us here." He nodded. They trapped themselves back in the base. Zolvik walked the perimeter himself, now no longer trusting scanners or maps or automated alerts. He saw the fear in his soldiers, the cracks in their spirit. One group refused to leave their barracks, another had welded their armor to their skin, claiming it was the only way to stop the ghosts. A shipment of flamethrowers arrived from orbit, with instructions to burn the jungle back, but the fire did not spread. It flickered, then died, as if the forest itself denied them permission. Then came the screams. It began with a distant echo, followed by silence, then more screaming, this time closer. Soon plasma bolts fired into the dark blindly, until the commanders called ceasefire, but nothing had attacked. No enemy bodies, no breach in the line, just fear feeding. Fear in the quiet. After the chaos, a single object was found at the gate. A helmet alien made returned, with a human knife embedded in its side. No blood, no signs of struggle, just placed there like a message inside the command tent. Dorvik clenched his hands around an ancient scroll passed down through Eldari lineages. It described beings of wrath shaped like men, whose souls burned hotter than suns, and whose hearts never yielded until all enemies were ash. Once thought it was myth, now he knew it was warning. That night the humans attacked not from the shadows but from the front. They walked out of the jungle slowly, calmly, weapons slung across their backs, faces expressionless. They moved like ghosts of war, but hit like thunder. One squad climbed the walls with grappling hooks, disabling turrets before a single alarm sounded. Another group detonated charges beneath the fuel depot from tunnels they had spent weeks digging by hand. Aliens fought back, screamed, cried, fired wildly. Some held their ground, others ran. The command center was breached, not by ships, not by drones, but by a single human unit. 10 strong, they fought like a tide that refused to pull back. Selvik tried to escape, but his transport exploded before he reached it. The fire lit up the sky, and for a moment, all he could see was a single silhouette standing atop the wreckage, not gloating, not shouting, just watching. Collapsed behind rubble, breathing hard, and for the first time in his life he felt something no training had prepared him for. He felt smell elsewhere on the battlefield. Claire faced off with an alien commander, twice her size, covered in armor, his blade sparking with energy. He laughed, told her she had no chance. She moved without reply, one step to duck, spin, strike. His blade missed hers, did not. She moved again and again like a rhythm learned from pain and memory. When he finally fell, he never understood what hit him. When the sun rose, the base was gone. What remained were smoking husks, broken weapons, and banners planted in the ground, each one marked with a single word: Humath. Galactic fleet watched from orbit, afraid to send reinforcements, afraid to fire, afraid to provoke what now felt like something more than an enemy. Human soldiers gathered their wounded, buried their dead, and disappeared again into the jungle. They did not celebrate, they did not boast, they did not rest. They prepared for the next move. With alien high command was in disarray. The defeat on Doraxis was not just a loss, it was a fracture in their belief system. The idea that strength came from size, numbers, and superior technology was now a shattered myth across war rooms in orbit. The word human was no longer spoken with mockery, but with caution, with fear, even with reverence in some corners, as if it were a force of nature. Instead of an enemy, a new order was passed. From the Central Command Corps: capture one human alive, any rank, any condition, bring it in. Breathing. This task fell to the elite Black Fang unit, known for extraction missions across death worlds. They were skilled, ruthless, enhanced with the best augments. Their leader, Commander Rax, accepted the order with pride. He saw the others failing and wanted to prove that fear was weakness, that humans bled like all creatures. They tracked a squad of humans moving near the northern ridge, where terrain was jagged and full of blind spots. The Black Fang unit set traps, triangulated escape pods, and used bait disguised as wounded soldiers at work. The humans moved fast, cutting through brush and lifting the bait out of danger just as planned. Black Fang struck from every direction. Plasma nets launched, concussion mines detonated, and tranquilizer gas filled the air. When the smoke cleared, one human lay on the ground unconscious. Rex approached slowly, weapons raised, cautious. Even in victory, he rolled the figure over, saw a face scarred and calm even in sleep, and said softly, "You are just flesh." The human was loaded onto a containment transport, surrounded by triple shields and neurodampeners. It took off without delay, heading for the orbital command, but halfway to orbit, systems failed. Alarms blared, shields flickered, and engines coughed into silence. One of the guards screamed and opened fire inside the cabin. Racks burst in, shouting for order, but it was too late. 2 soldiers were already down. The human was gone. If emergency lights flicked on and revealed something etched into the inner wall, scratched in metal by hand. A single word: Chaos erupted in orbit. Lockdown protocols activated, command room sealed, and emergency teams deployed through the halls, hunting a ghost one that had escaped restraints, shields, and surveillance. With nothing but instinct and muscly, a technician found a camera feed showing the human crawling through a vent, eyes wide yet unafraid like a predator. Inside a cage of prey, General Dorvik was present when the alert came, and he watched the footage in silence, then spoke to the nearest officer. Seal the bridge, prepare for breach here, the human is alone. The officer replied, confused. Dorvik stared at him, then said quietly, one is an omen. While the human reached the central systems core, bypassed guards, using stolen access tags and memorized patrol routes. It was not luck. It was training, experience, intuition beyond anything the aliens could simulate. The control chamber, he inserted a device and began uploading something foreign, unreadable, a virus, not of code but of logic, a pattern that confused the very AI running the ship. The screens flashed once, then turned black, displaying only a reflection of the human standing calm behind the chair. Spoke only once into the open channel, a message that reached every ship in Orbithus is Mercythan. The virus spread, cutting calm, scrambling maps, disabling weapons, and opening every door. Across the fleet, panic surged. Officers ran, soldiers shouted, commands were lost in noise. One man had done this. One human had turned an empire of ships into drifting metal racks. Finally found him on the lower deck, blooded, limping, cornered. The human looked up, eyes calm, and said to Ladathan. He jumped backward into a maintenance shaft, disappearing once more into the ship. By the time they restored control, half the systems were gone. Multiple shuttles had been launched manually, and no one could track them. One shuttle crashed on the planet. One was found empty, floating in space. The third vanished without trace. Rumors spread fast across the alien worlds about the one human who escaped from the heart of their fleet, walked their corridors, and left behind fear deeper than any invasion ever could. In Doraxis, the jungle stood quiet again, but only on the surface. Underneath, whispers traveled from outpost to outpost. They took one of us. They tried to hold him, walked through fire, and came back. The aliens stopped hunting. The tiny Armethi started guarding themselves. From it, across the galaxy, systems once proud of their military strength began altering protocols. Every alien fleet now included mandatory human threat response drills. Entire units were assigned to study their tactics, their weapons, their behavior. Even though they understood so little of what made humans fight the way they did in the planet Vornor, home to the analytical minds of the Saladar, a new division of war scholars was formed to answer a question haunting every empire: how could so few cause so much collapse? They gathered data from Doraxis, from the orbital incident, from fragmented files decrypted through ancient cores, and even from whispered stories of survivors. They charted movement patterns, heart rate, psychological pressure points, but still none of it explained. The sheer Walloni scholar named Telri proposed a theory that caused silence among his peers. Humans do not fight for conquest or command, he said. They fight because when they choose to, they become more than alive. They become unstoppable. Back on Doraxis, the jungle stirred again. Satellites picked up movement, a pulse of energy different from before, more deliberate, not hidden like the earlier raids, but bold, loud. It was a signal not for battle, but for ending it. Captain Silas stood beside a massive tree, its roots wrapped around ancient stones that bore markings from civilizations long gone. He looked tired, older, but unbroken. His team stood behind him, veterans now, not just of war, but of legend. They had watched the enemy collapse from within, and now they waited for the last piece to fall in orbit. The alien fleets had regrouped, new commanders sworn in old tactics abandoned. They prepared for one final operation, not to destroy the humans, but to meet them, to speak face to face. For the first time since the campaign began, a delegation was sent down, heavily protected, cautious, but not aggressive. They landed in a clearing surrounded by nothing but wind and trees. Then the humans appeared, not from ships or machines, but from shadows, moving like they had always been there, as if the jungle itself had birthed them. Captain Silas approached alone, no weapon in hand, only a small device glowing blue. The alien envoy stepped forward. His name was Vreld. Eyes sharp, voice measured. Said, "You are fewer than we believe it." Silas replied, "We are more than you imagine." Vreld asked, "What do you want? Why keep fighting? You have won." Silas looked past him toward the sky, then said, "We did not fight for victory. We fought to be remembered, to remind this galaxy that small does not mean weak, and silence does not mean surrender." Vreld lowered his guard and nodded slowly. "There is no honor in more death." Silas held out the device. It pulsed with encoded data. "Truce," he said. Vreld took it. The alien ships stood down slowly, one by one, drifting into standby. The jungle went quiet again, but not in fear and peace. The Galactic Council met days later to review the treaty. The words were simple: no more human deployments without agreement, no more interference on Deathworlds, no more underestimation. In hushed corners, another truth spread: the treaty was not a gesture of diplomacy, it was servivalve. Empires that had ruled for generations now feared one species, not for their weapons, but for their spirit. Dorvik resigned from his post, returning to his world in silence. He refused interviews, and left behind only one final report. It read, "The humans taught us that a tiny army is only tiny until it stands, and when it stands with fallen Doraxis." The humans vanished back into the forests, leaving no trace behind. The story as a burned banner still hung over the ruined outpost, flapping in the wind, marked with dirt blood, and the symbol of a hand raised in defiant seat became a monument not built by engineers, but carved into legend. And those who once laughed at the tiny army never laughed again. Years passed since the jungle of Doraxis had echoed with screams and war machines. The trees had grown back thicker, stronger, hiding all traces of bunkers, blood, and burned banners. But stories could not be buried so easily across the stars. The legend of the tiny army grew beyond tactics and politics. It became something whispered in military camps, taught in secret halls, and feared in the dreams of commanders who once believed themselves untouchable. The Galactic Council avoided this subject in public, yet behind sealed chambers they discussed the humans more than any other species. Data streams were filled with proposals and simulations. None could predict human behavior. None could explain how one squad could collapse an entire fleet. From the inside, some began to say the humans were no longer part of the galactic equation. They were the variable that changed it forever. In a distant moon far from Doraxis, a training base was constructed by one of the smaller civilizations eager to build strength. Without attracting attention, the base was high-tech, buried under ice, shielded from every known threat. But one day a strange object landed outside the perimeter. No energy signature, no propulsion trail, just a smooth black container. Standing alone in the snow, the commander of the base ordered it scanned, analyzed, even touched, but it revealed nothing until one technician noticed a faint marking engraved so small it could barely be seen without magnification. The marking was not a threat, not a symbol of where it was. An human. The container was opened under extreme protocol. Inside was a single book, handwritten with pages made of reinforced polymer, resistant to time. Firewater. Inside were passages describing every step of the Doraxis operation. Not battle tactics, not weapon schematics, but thoughts, memories, emotions, names of those who fought and those who did. It was not a manual, it was a memorial. The base commander ordered the book copied and shared secretly across military channels. Soon it spread through underground networks, through academies and resistance cells. In time, new recruits on every world began asking not how to fight humans, but how to be like them, inspired not by victory, but by resiliency. In Earth, the humans lived quietly, their veterans retired or assigned to remote outposts. Never seeking power or conquest, they had left a message with their silence that echoed louder than fleets. An Arma's own child of a veteran once asked her father why they never told the galaxy who they truly were, smiled, and replied, "They already knows." Where a historian from the Salazar compiled every known account, every battle log and transmission into a single archive, handed it with a quote, not from a leader or a general, but from a nameless soldier whose message was recorded in a damaged helmet cam. During the final hours of Doraxis, it said, "If they fear us, good. But if they respect us, better. And if they remember us, then we did not fall in vain." As peace held longer than any historian predicted, something shifted in the hearts of the galactic species. Not in fear, but in humility. They began to rethink strength, not as numbers or tech, but as the will to stand when everything else breaks. And across the stars, whenever a young officer questioned whether a small force could change the course of history, Somion always replied, they laughed at the tiny army until they saw the humans. Many seasons had passed since the war that changed the stars, and though the trees on Doraxis stood tall again and the smoke had long faded, the memory of the tiny army never left. Those who once ruled the stars with arrogance now moved carefully, always remembering the silence before the storm. That silence had not come from weakness, it came from focus, and now it echoed across every world in quiet reverence to the force that could not be erased. On the edge of the known galaxy, in a sector once considered lawless, a distress signal blinked from a mining colony abandoned during the conflict. Ships from multiple empires responded, curious, cautious, but what they found was not a call for help. It was a shrine not of religion, but of respect. Weapons rusted and planted in the ground, uniforms folded and placed with care, and a plaque carved into stone, written in every known language. Eat, read. They came when no one else would. They stood when all others fled. They were not many, but they were enough. A young alien cadet walked the grounds, his mind full of stories he once thought exaggerated, but as he stood before the plaque he felt it deep in his bones, something beyond fear, something like a we. Asked his mentor, "Why does everyone still talk about them? Why do we train like them? Why do we avoid their worlds? Why do we whisper their name but never speak it loud?" Lithe old mentor placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Because once they were underestimated, and now they are eternal in the deepest vault of the Galactic Archive. A hidden chamber contained a single object untouched by time, a combat helmet cracked at the side. Its visor still smeared with red clay from Doraxis, beside it a message etched into the metal. With a combat knife you were the tiny army, and we were never small, and somewhere in the dark corners of space where silence still ruled and stars still burned, someone whispered a promise, not of revenge, not of conquest, but of memory. Thee will remember, thee must, thee always will end.